All right. Hello again, adventurers, and welcome to another exciting daily vlog. This is daily vlog number 39. Yeah, I've been doing this longer than I thought I would. So, today, I want to be like all the other YouTubers. I want to be where the people are. You know. I want to do some reaction content specifically because, again, for those of you that don't know, my name, Trainer Jody, has nothing to do with Pokemon. Love Pokemon, been playing it since Pokemon Red. I got my first first purchase of an actual gaming console that I did myself was I bought one of those gray brick Game Boys, and I got a Pokemon Red with it. So I like Pokemon. The Trainer Jody in my name has nothing to do with Pokemon or any of that. I am a trainer. It's what I used to do professionally before I became disabled. It's one of my passions. I really enjoy training. One day I hope to write a book on it, and I've come up with all these training rules that I use when I'm teaching new players, like D&D or any RPG, or really anytime I'm teaching someone something new. I use these training rules because over a decade of actual professional experience plus private experience, probably I've been doing this like 20 years at this point, in various mediums and things like that, going all the way back to, when I was in high school. I used to teach kids how to march, for marching band, and read coordinates for field marching and stuff like that. So I've been training for a very long time. I'm very good at it. One of the creators that I sometimes watch, I don't watch a ton of her content, but a lot of her shorts I think are really good. I think she's an amazing person in general. Emiru, who is part of OTK, which is the kind of gaming group-ish thing. They're not a, they're hard to explain. They're OTK. That's what they are. They're OTK. They're founded by Asmongold and I believe lots of people. Asmongold is the one that I know the most about it. And I think I talked about him in another video. Anyway, I don't watch a ton of OTK because a lot of their personalities are just kind of jarring to me. Not that I think they're bad people or anything like that. Just a lot of their personalities are very similar to people I knew in high school and college, and when I was working and going out in the real world, that I didn't get along with. Doesn't mean that I wouldn't get along with them. It's an associative thing. They bring up bad memories is all it is. I think they're fine people as far as I can tell. I don't know any of them. But Emiru, I like her content. I like her as a person. I think she's a cool person. I like the cosplay stuff that she does. And a lot of the interactions that she has with a lot of the OTK people are really fun. Anyway, Emiru posted a video like an hour ago that's titled, "I'm Learning How to Fight." And effectively what it is she goes to a gym run by a dude named RJ, who I believe, as far as I can tell from the little tiny bit of research that I've done into this, he seems to be a professional MMA fighter. And from what I can tell, he's relatively successful at that. The stuff that he does here shows that he definitely knows what he's doing. At the absolute bare minimum, he knows what he's doing. And from what I can tell, just from this video, because they don't explain a ton of stuff in it, from what I can tell, it seems that either RJ has his own gym or is employed by a gym to teach people how to fight. And so Emiru goes there to learn. And this is where I start getting slightly technical, because I would never have considered myself a quote-unquote fighter, but I did practice Taekwondo for, I don't know, like a decade-ish. I took traditional instruction for like 2.5 years, and then I continued training on my own for the rest of that decade. And I also picked up some stuff like Savate and learned a little bit of Jeet Kune Do and tried my hand at some Aikido and Capoeira. I never, ever got good at Capoeira. I tried really hard to just master the Ginga, which is their stance, and I could never do it. I'm also a big, tall, lanky, uncoordinated guy, and that's why I wanted to learn Capoeira, because you have to be coordinated to do it, and it just didn't work. So anyway, I would never consider myself a fighter. I would consider myself a Taekwondo practitioner. He is... obviously, he's a fighter, but what they're learning here is not what I would consider quote-unquote fighting. What she learns here is boxing, which a lot of people don't quite understand just how complex boxing is. It is a remarkably complex martial art that seems relatively simple. Like in boxing, compared to something like Taekwondo, like to just do a quick comparison for you. In boxing, you effectively have 4 strikes that you can do. You have a jab, you have a cross, and I can't really do them really well because technically when you're boxing, you're technically a little bit off center. So you have a front hand and then a backhand, and I'm perfectly centered with the camera. But so you have your jab, you have your cross, you have a hook, and you have an uppercut. And that's what that's all you can do in boxing. So there is a grand total of 4 strikes in boxing. And so because of that, it would seem relatively simplistic. And there's nothing remotely simplistic about boxing. To compare it to Taekwondo, the version of Taekwondo I learned was technically an Americanized of a version that added in hand techniques. In traditional Korean Taekwondo, you don't learn hand techniques. And the reason behind this is your legs are by far more powerful than your hands. You are never going to be able to throw a punch that can compete with a well-thrown kick, ever. You also have significantly increased range with your legs, and there's just a lot of different things you can do with your legs that you just can't do with your hands. However, the Americanized kind of sport version of Taekwondo that I learned had us learning hand techniques. And even with the fact that the emphasis was put on our kicks, there were more hand techniques I learned in Taekwondo than exist in boxing. We still had jabs and crosses, though we just called them jab and punch. And then we also had knife hand strike, we had a ridge hand strike, we had a spear hand strike. None of those techniques are really ever used in sports Taekwondo because all of those things are designed to target soft tissue, which is generally illegal to target. Like you don't do a spear hand strike to the nose. Oh, I also forgot, we also learned a palm hand strike, which palm hand strike you use a lot in self-defense. But so grand total, that's 6 hand techniques in Taekwondo. So you would think Taekwondo is significantly more complex than boxing. And it's not really. There's just different focuses. And so what we're going to do when we're talking about this, I am not a boxer. I understand some aspects of boxing because Savate, which is effectively French boxing or French kickboxing. I studied Savate for a few years. It incorporates Western boxing with a few kicking moves that are kind of exclusively designed for Savate. And Savate in and of itself is actually designed to be done on ships. So it's a really, really fascinating French fighting style. So I understand the basics of boxing, as in I understand the strikes that exist. But because Savate is kickboxing, the idea of footwork is completely alien to me because, especially going back to my Taekwondo roots, you don't technically have footwork, quote unquote, when you are when you're doing Taekwondo because so much of the kicks require you to stand in specific positions already. So footwork is incorporated into the kicks. And another thing that's kind of interesting, Taekwondo and a lot of other martial arts like it, when you spar and when you do competitive fighting in it, it's generally done in a linear fashion, very similar to fencing, where you may have a large kind of square arena, but you're generally moving backwards and forwards. for the most part. You can move around a little bit. It's not like if you watch like Olympic Taekwondo, it's not like pure back and forth. But a lot of Taekwondo sparring is done in lines as opposed to like MMA is done in an octagon. If you look at boxing, boxing is done in a ring that is square, and you're not even encouraged, you are required to constantly be kind of moving around your opponent and trying to get to their blind side and doing all these other things, because that's how boxing works. It's one of the reasons why it's such a complex martial art, is because depending on where you're standing, the stance that you're in, where your feet placement is specifically, where the ring is, because you can get people trapped up against the ropes and stuff like that, and you immediately will start kind of changing how you're dealing with your opponent. Or if you get them locked into a corner, you will change how you are fighting, which really doesn't happen in Taekwondo sparring. There are no ropes or anything to get tangled up in. There are no corners that you can kind of get forced into. There's no clinching or cinching or anything like that, because it's just not a thing that needs to happen in Taekwondo, and it's an actual strategic part of boxing. So anyway, the reason I'm going to critique this is not to critique his boxing ability. Again, if I was ever to get into the ring with this RJ person, it wouldn't be a contest. Like, if he was nice, which he seems like a really nice guy, if he was nice, he might let me get some hits in before he completely demolishes me. But that's only if he's being nice. In my martial prime, when I was actually training, I didn't do it daily, but I did it like between 3 to 5 times a week. I would do training and stuff like that. I was in great shape. In my prime, I might be able to last a round or two in the ring with him. Maybe. But this is not something... and again, if we were just doing boxing, I would have been dead. Because again, I don't box. I do Taekwondo. And especially since he's an MMA fighter, I would assume he's probably trained either Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or Judo or some other grappling martial art, which I don't do any. I tried Aikido. I didn't do very well at it, and Aikido in and of itself is not particularly great for combat sport. As a combat sport, it's just horrible. It has other really, really cool, interesting uses. Combat sport is not one of them. So if he's ever to grapple me, no contest. The only advantage I think I have on him is I would guess I probably have at least 50 pounds on him because he's in great shape and I am not. But, so this is not me trying to critique his boxing technique or anything like that. This is me critiquing his training method, because again, in that aspect, I believe that I am an expert. I have years of experience, and I've developed my own techniques and things like that. I consider myself a master. And this is not me saying that he is a bad trainer or anything like that. Again, either he owns his own gym or he is employed by a gym. And I've seen quite a few other like Instagram reels and stuff where he's showing how he does his sessions, and he does very well. However, I think the training techniques that he does here are a bit inefficient and could be better to get a better result from Emiru. Again, this is not me saying he's bad or anything like that. It's obvious to me that he knows what he's doing, and an extremely common misconception amongst basically the entire population is if you are good at something, then you are also good at teaching someone to do the thing that you're good at. And that's not true. If you're good at something, it gives you a leg up when training, because you know, especially if you're good at something, because you actually do it. You know what actually works and what doesn't work, which someone with a theoretical knowledge is never going to be able to learn that. You have to physically do something in order to learn the actual things that work and don't work. So he has that going for him. And the reason that he uses these techniques is probably because this is how he was trained. And it worked very, very well for him. And I'm not saying that the techniques that he's using here are bad or that somehow they will not create good fighters. What I'm saying is they're inefficient and are creating instances that are going to cause loss of knowledge and loss of progress far more often than they are going to cause gain of progress and mastery. And those are the things that I focus on when I am training anyone in anything, is I'm focusing on progress and mastery. Those are the two most important things into training. Is you need to be making progress towards something, and you should be very regularly mastering aspects of the things that you're training. And by mastery, I don't mean mastery as in you can never get better. Mastery in this particular instance means that you have learned it the way it is designed to be done. Not that it's impossible for you to get better, but you have learned it the way it is designed to be done. One of the rules that I will say in here over and over and over again is a lot of people say practice makes perfect. Practice makes perfect is a lie. What the phrase should be is perfect practice makes perfect. The reason why, again, I come from a martial arts background and also a musical background. And I've been doing music much longer than I've been doing martial arts. I started with playing an instrument when I was in 5th grade, which is actually around the same time that I started martial arts. I just realized that. But in addition to that, I continued classical training in music and being an instrumentalist all the way through 2 years of college. Whereas Taekwondo and martial arts in general, I stopped getting traditional classical training after about 2 years. So, in music performance, if you practice the same lick or the same kind of phrase over and over and over again, you practice it 100 times, and on the 100th time, you finally get it right. You get it absolutely perfect. Congratulations, you have just learned the phrase incorrectly. And the reason why is the reason that you practice is to develop muscle memory. So you don't actually have to focus on what you're doing. Because if you're playing a piece, especially if you're playing something like bebop jazz, where you're doing 150 beats per minute, and the notes are just flying past you, if you have to take the time to look at the sheet music, look at the notes, translate that music notation into a letter, translate that letter into a fingering and an articulation, and then play it, and also figure out timing and all that other stuff, you're going to be behind the band. So a lot of practicing is just getting muscle memory. So you're basically just following along the music to kind of remember which muscle memory to access at that particular point into the time. So when you practice something 100 times and you only get it perfectly right once, well, your muscle memory, because you've done it wrong so many more times than you've done it right, your muscle memory is going to remember the wrong way much more readily than it's going to remember the right way. So perfect practice makes perfect means you don't start counting reps until you're doing it right, until you're doing it perfectly. Everything before then doesn't count. You don't count it, and it counts against you, because now you have to unlearn the wrong thing that you just did. So anyway, I'll be going over my various rules of training as we do this. And this is one of the first times I've done a reaction like this. I'm probably going to skip around a little bit because I don't want to watch this entire of a video. It's only 22 minutes, as you guys can see. But I'm not a big fan of reaction content in general, that if you watch the reaction, you don't have to watch the actual video because you've already watched the whole thing. I don't like that. I feel like it takes away views from the creator. And again, I really like Emiru. Also, Emiru is massively bigger than me on the interwebs, and OTK is a very, very large organization with a very, very large fan base. So I'd never want to do something that upsets anyone over there. Also, I really like her. I think she's great. So I'm going to jump around a little bit. I'm going to be stopping and pausing fairly regularly because I've already watched the entirety of this video, and like I said, I thought it was really good. It got the trainer in me irked. So I'm going to watch this, and yeah, let's just go with this and see where it goes. So this is just the little. I'm just checking levels.
Bro, why am I already so sweaty looking.
So this is her kind of introducing stuff.
I was wondering, even
All right.
video, but, I mean,
So let's go back a little bit.
said you're the
All right, so we're going to go back. So this is her just getting into the gym and everything like that, introducing other people, introducing us to RJ. We don't need to know anything about that because none of that is training related. The first thing I am going to do is talk about this first thing that he does. And so I think I'm going to go here. So this is her coming in.
A lot of them already know Juliana. I brought boxing gloves and hand wraps and stuff.
Perfect, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know
I'll
if
wrap
I
you up.
need these.
You got hand wraps?
Okay, yeah, I bought
I'll
hand
wrap you
wraps.
up.
This is RJ, by the way. Miz said you're the best fighter.
So this is where the trainer in me kicks in. One of the kind of essential aspects of any kind of martial training in general is you always start with stretching and warm-ups. This is what, again, when I took kind of traditional Taekwondo training, we had 2-hour-long classes, and the first 10 to 20 minutes, so the entirety of this video, the first 10 to 20 minutes would be stretching and would also be little bits of warm-up and stuff like that. None of that happens here. And that is my first issue with this in Jiu-Jitsu general, because in a training aspect, the warm-up process is essential as well. You need to stretch your training muscles the same way that you would stretch your regular muscles, so you don't kind of break them. So the first thing here is when I get a new person that I'm going to be training, the absolute first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to have a little bit of a dialogue with them. I'm going to go, hey, it's great to meet you. Let's talk about your background in this subject. If I'm treating, because I have taught self-defense and things like that to friends. And so my first question every single time is, okay, what martial training have you had, if any? Have you ever boxed before? Did your dad teach you how to throw a punch? Have you been in fistfights before? Anything that would relate tangentially to combat in some way, shape, or form. And so we'll start with that, and I will start to get an idea of where they're at. And by asking them questions that require them to remember aspects related to this, we are already starting their brain in the process of, okay, I know I'm right here in this moment, but I'm going to be connecting it to other memories that I already have, which is an extremely effective training process in general for retention, is finding ways to link new knowledge that they are gaining with old knowledge that they already know. The more connections you can make in the brain, the easier it's going to be for them to retain. Now, does that mean that this is a horrible, disgusting, bad trainer? No. It just means that he didn't do one of the things that 99% of trainers don't do, because they don't understand the purpose of it. So let's watch him rap, and let's watch kind of the interaction that they have here.
I'm just one of them.
One of them. Miz said he's the best. I'm very nervous. I've
Oh, why?
I work out a little bit. I'll do like a little bit of cardio, but I mean, you can see I'm like super skinny and stuff, so I'm kind of nervous. I want to learn how to fight for a while, but I'm not sure if I'll.
We're gonna get you.
Focus, come on, focus. You can do it,
I was
camera.
wondering, even if I train a lot
By the way,
of
this.
weight,
You wanna fight?
I just do this. By the way, if anyone's getting annoyed because the camera's not focusing, congratulations. You know what it's like to be a YouTuber now. Your camera will never focus when you want it to. So I have no problem with this, and it actually doesn't matter, because what he's doing right here is not training in any way, shape, or form. Now, there is a dialogue here, which is nice, but she is leading it entirely. So what she's doing is actually better training material than what he is actually giving out right now. And I'm going to guess, again, I can't read his mind, but I'm going to guess the reason that he's not talking right now is he's focusing on wrapping her hands correctly. Again, I am not a boxer. I have never used hand wraps. However, my very basic understanding of hand wraps is they are very, very useful in ensuring that you don't hurt yourself when you are boxing. And if you do them wrong, they're basically useless. So I'm assuming he's focusing on this because, first of all, he's wrapping hands that aren't his. He's wrapped his hands. I will guarantee he's wrapped his hands thousands of times. Probably, maybe even tens of thousands of times. He mentions that he's been, later in the video, he mentions that he's been training for 15 years. In 15 years, and now he also mentions later in the video that he trains 2 to 3 times a day now. When you're doing it that much, yeah, he probably has tens of thousands of times that he's wrapped his own hands. But he's never wrapped Emiru's hands before. She has different hands. She has different bone structure and things like that. So he's probably just really focusing on ensuring that her hands are protected and comfortable so that during the training, that nothing bad happens. Because one of the worst things that can happen in your first training experience is if you have a really negative first training experience, it can end the rest of your training in that particular subject. So this is actually a really, really good thing where he's taking the time to ensure that her first experience is going to be a positive one. He just, and because again, he's focusing so much on this, I think there could have been better ways for him to kind of guide this, especially since you'll see a theme with Emiru where she keeps constantly talking about just how weak she is. And he brushes it off a lot because here's another secret. Strength is not the be-all, end-all in any martial arts. Technique can make up for a lot of missing strength. Doesn't mean strength is inconsequential. A stronger person is going to be able to throw harder punches and is going to be able to do more damage with them. Strength is always a benefit. It is just not absolutely necessary. And so you can see that in the way that he does it. He mentions in the video that technique can overcome a lack of strength. But he could be doing a better job at kind of leading this while he is rapping. I don't know how difficult it is to wrap someone's hands because, again, I've never wrapped my own hands, much less wrap someone else's. So I actually don't know if it does require this much focus or it's just something that he does as part of his routine, that the wrapping aspect is a way for him to focus himself into the training or whatever. There's a billion different things it could be. What I'm saying is, from a training perspective, this is really, really good time that could be used as that stretching time. So one of my rules of training, remember to stretch. This could be used as stretching time, where you're talking about the things, and Emiru's doing a pretty good job of kind of leading the conversation in the realm, but she's focusing almost exclusively on her physical size and her musculature, which isn't going to help her in any way, shape, or form in this training session. So a really skilled trainer would redirect the conversation to talk about, okay, well, what other martial training have you had? You said you work out. What kind of workouts do you do? Because that can give you insight into kind of what muscle groups that she's used to training, so that you can relate that when you're asking her to do other things. You go, okay, this is going to be very much like this particular workout that you've done. Because again, we're going to connect new information with information they already have, and that makes you retain it that much better. This, to me, is kind of dropping the ball in an extremely common place to drop the ball. This is before the training even begins. You should be training the person that you're training, and they're not here. So again, remember to stretch. Rule number 1, remember to stretch, and that means your brain too. So let's keep going here.
Well, I want to eventually maybe spar some people. But,
Okay, yeah, definitely do that.
But I wouldn't ever be able to fight like a big guy or something.
Well, you might, but we're gonna teach you how to
Okay.
not to mess with you.
Oh shit. We're gonna do this once a week, probably starting. Do most people just do once a week or more
You do
often?
as many as you want. Yeah.
So this is another thing that I think just kind of highlights, first of all, how comfortable he is in this position. That's something that you can't teach. This is just something that comes with experience. Not only is he incredibly comfortable, and it annoys me that my maybe if I'm not going to play around with my camera right now, but I'm gesturing over here because the video is right here, like I'm pointing at him right now, but everything's weird on camera. Anyway, so with what he's doing here, not only is he very confident in the position, which is essential for a trainer. If you look like you don't know what you're doing or you look unsteady, people won't listen to you as much, and these doubts will creep in. Does he know what he's doing? Do I really need to be listening to them? And that will interrupt your training. The fact that he's so relaxed and he's so kind of confident when he is not confident in like a prideful way, he's just very much, yeah, this is how it works. And every time she comes up with a reason to doubt herself, he immediately stops the thought and goes, well, if that's the way you want to go, that's fine. But, you can do this, I'd never be able to, fight a big guy. It's like, well, we're going to teach you how to make it so nobody messes with you, That is a really, really effective thing because you're building confidence with your trainee, and confidence is more important than anything in training. Unfounded confidence can get you screwed up, but 9 times out of 10, the most difficult part of a new trainee becoming good at what they're learning is it's a confidence issue. Especially if it's something that they've never done before. You always run into confidence issues. So starting by building up confidence right from the get-go is good. And then the next thing is like, well, how often do people train? Is 1 week normal? It's like, you can do whatever you feel good with. You could go 2 to 3 times a week. You can go once a week. Whatever you like. Again, this is instilling confidence that you are in control of your training. I am here just as a facilitator to train you. But this is your training. You are going to get what you get out of it based on what it is. And so all of the stuff that he's doing here is really, really good. I have no idea if he understands, like he's consciously doing this, or this is just what he's learned from doing this as long as he has. But if this is just kind of unconscious talent, I guess we could call it, it's good. So let's keep going.
Well, what does a good fighter probably fights like every day?
I train 2 or 3 times a day.
2 or 3 times a day? Oh my god.
Alright, we're gonna spar. Are you ready for that?
Oh, okay,
No,
wait.
I'm playing. No.
This is another thing. There are some trainers that don't do this. I do this constantly. I mix in comedy and I mix in jokes and stuff like that. And the reason being is it's very, very easy for trainees, especially if you're doing group training. Like this is one-on-one training, and that's a kind of different beast than group training. I've seen videos of him doing group training. He does that pretty well too. But both in individual and especially in group training, it's extremely easy for your trainees to just lose focus or not kind of listen to absolutely everything that you're saying because they're learning a lot and they may be kind of going over things in their head or just kind of focus, especially something physical like this. Emiru, I would guess, I don't know Emiru, I've never spoken with her, so this is all me interpreting based on my own experiences. But Emiru right now is probably focusing a lot on the kind of physical sensations that are going on right now. She's about to do something very physical. She is hyper aware of her own body. She keeps kind of showing that when she keeps talking about how weak she is and things like that. And she's also on camera, and so she's trying to be entertaining. And so it's very, very easy for her to be focusing on all these other things and not listening to her trainer. And so by using humor and stuff like that, it immediately brings back focus to you. Because what he does here, because again, she's already mentioned, like, I'd like to spar sometime. But just based on that statement, she feels that she's nowhere near ready to spar. Which she's not, by the way. She doesn't know anything about that. If you were just to put her in the ring with someone and let her spar, she'd get the floor wiped with her. And RJ knows that. And so by just bringing that up, he's, again, relating something back to a conversation that they've already had. So it's kind of linking things. And then he makes it a joke, and it settles the tension in the room. Because, again, this can be a very intimidating experience. Especially one-on-one training can be very, very intimidating. Especially when you're going up with someone like RJ, who is a master. He is a professional fighter. So Emiru has already kind of clarified that this is a master. I'm very intimidated by the master. And RJ is not a small guy. Like, he is muscular. He knows what he's doing as far as combat is concerned. He is an intimidating force, and the fact that he's so casual and nonchalant in these interactions is another really good benefit for the training, because again, it's obvious that Emiru is already a little bit intimidated by him, as she should be. He's an intimidating figure, and he kind of casts all that off as quickly as he can and tries to be very calm and comfortable. And then he tosses this joke in, and it instantly forces her to kind of reassess what's going on and focus on what he's saying again. Humor is an incredibly effective method at bringing the conversation back to you. Does that mean you have to tell jokes if you're a trainer? No. If you're not good at telling jokes, don't use them. Know what you're good at. However, if you can incorporate little bits of humor and little jokes and stuff like that, anything that gets that kind of breaks the tension and brings the focus back to you, anything that forces your audience to reevaluate where their focus is. It can be a joke. It can be sudden changes in volume. Something that is incredibly effective. If you start talking softer, people will listen more intently because it's just more difficult to hear. And so as you get softer and softer and then immediately get loud again, if you do too much, like you go from super soft to screaming, you're just going to upset them. But if you get softer a little bit and you get a little bit calmer and then you get a little bit louder, that will force them to focus, and then you can go back into your regular kind of canter. So yes, this particular thing, again, I don't think he was doing that intentionally. This is just how he interacts with people, and it again is just a really effective method of getting people to focus. So let's keep going.
Me and you, baby, me and you.
It's honestly going to be really basic, but it might feel, boring and mundane. But in order to learn anything, especially with fighting, you've got to do the super basics for a while too.
Okay.
Because if your feet aren't right with your punches and stuff, you're just you're going to be doing everything wrong, and we don't want to be doing that. Especially me, if I'm teaching you, I don't want you, learning wrong.
Okay.
All right.
So another really, really good thing here, and this is actually one of my rules. One of the first rules I ever came up with is actually two rules in one. They are begin at the beginning and remember to kiss. Keep it simple, stupid. And this is exactly what it is. And this was always my emphasis in martial training in general, is your fundamentals and your basics are your most important thing. And especially in boxing, where literally you have 4 strikes. You only have 4 strikes. If you master those 4 strikes, if they are always solid, if your mechanics are always solid, you are going to be a significantly more adept fighter. 100% of the time. The better you master those and the better you know how to use them, when to use them, the better a fighter you're going to be. You can have the most amazing footwork. You can be the best dodger in the world. If you can't throw a jab or a cross correctly, you're never going to win a single bout. So I like the fact that we're focusing on the basics. However, we're about to see him make a mistake right at the beginning.
So, are you left-handed or right-handed?
Right-handed.
You're right-handed? Alright, so we're going to put our left foot forward. And then I'm going to go down this line. All I want you to do is stick your elbows in, bend your legs. I'm going to bend my legs a little bit, but I don't want to be too tipped over on my front foot, because that's what's called looking over the cliff. I want to have, I want 50-50 weight.
So this is something I'm going to bring up a little bit later. A rule that I've used for a while. I used to have a different name for it. I now call it don't use a translator. But you'll notice, and I guess we can talk about this. It's more effectively demonstrated later on. But the rule don't use a translator. In every kind of field where people start to develop mastery in it, you will start to create colloquialisms, little sayings that someone inside the field understands exactly what they did. Don't look over the, what was it again? Don't look over the balcony, I think he said, or Don't look over the cliff. Let's see what he said.
Elbows in, bend your legs. I'm gonna bend my legs a little bit, but I don't want to be too tipped over on my front foot because that's what's called like looking over the cliff. I want to.
So looking over the cliff. If he was just sitting there and her stance was too far forward and he just started saying, hey, don't look over the cliff, she's going to be completely flabbergasted. She's gonna, what cliff? There are no cliffs in here. This is a padded floor that's very, very flat. Why, what cliff are you talking about? That's a colloquialism. To someone that is familiar with boxing, they probably know what that means. And what happens here is he immediately uses a phrase and then tells her what it is. This is what I call using a translator. The colloquialisms are useful when you get to a certain level because you can use them instead of having... generally, your colloquialism is going to be much shorter to say and will relay a significant amount of information in a much shorter time than actually explaining what the problem is. However, at the absolute first session, colloquialisms are just going to confuse your person, your trainee. And you can see right here, as soon as he gives it a name, she immediately goes, oh, this is something I have to remember. You can see it in her reaction where she goes, okay, remember, don't look over the cliff, don't look over the cliff, don't look over the cliff, don't look over the cliff. And so she's focusing so much on this phrase, she's not focusing on her footwork at all. You can see his footwork is really good here because he's a boxer. He's a fighter. He's very good at what he does. This is incredibly natural for him. But Emiru, her legs are straight up and down, and she's not even focusing on it. As we go forward a little bit.
Yeah, I want 50-50 weight in my stance so I can rock back and forth.
So as you can see, you get this little smirk there, and really... Hold on a second, guys. I always do this. Damn alarm. Ugh. Pisses me off. Every time. I even made a note. Bring your phone with you, and I forgot it. All right. Let's go back to this. So you can see she is already going, ha-ha, looking over the cliff, ha-ha. Her form is not great here. We can't really see much, but we can definitely see a difference between how she's standing and how he's standing. So, by using a translator, by using a colloquialism and immediately explaining what it is, you have completely gotten your trainee out of what they were supposed to be doing, which is learning the stance. And so, yeah, don't use a translator. Don't use colloquialisms and things like that when you're training. I used to call this particular rule avoid Christianese. And that actually came from training I got when I was learning how to evangelize. Growing up in the Christian church, we have a lot of phrases that nobody else in the world uses the same way we do. And we sound crazy when we say them. Things like, hey, can I share my testimony with you? If I walk up to a random person and say, hey, can I share my testimony with you? They're going to go, what crime was committed? And maybe you should find a cop. Because testimony, or a lawyer, or a courtroom, testimony is something you give in court. Or another phrase that is used constantly is, can I witness to you? Witnessing to the grand majority of people is, what crime was committed? And where are the police? I'm not a police officer, so maybe you should share your witness statement with the police. Witnessing in the Christian church is talking about your faith, and your testimony is specifically the story of how you became kind of a devoted Christian. That's what your testimony is. And witnessing is the act of sharing your testimony. Neither of those two phrases or those two words mean anything to a random person that you're talking to on the road. And so due to the fact that that particular phrase, don't use Christianese, has a lot of negative connotations behind it and can be a little bit bigoted, I changed the name because it works better. Don't use a translator. Don't teach them the colloquialisms on the first day. If you want them to eventually learn the colloquialisms, then take the time to teach them and train them in the phrases that you're going to be using. But don't interrupt your stance training to train them in something completely different, which is language training. You can take time to teach them language. You can take time to teach them stances. You don't need to combine the two. The more things that you combine, the less they're going to retain. Focus on one thing. That's where begin at the beginning is. Focus at the beginning and keep it simple, stupid, is one thing at a time. One thing at a time. Once they've mastered that, you move on to the next thing. You don't move forward until mastery is there. So, see, I'll mention that a few more times because he does it constantly throughout this. And again, that is one of the problems with being very, very skilled in a field before becoming a trainer, is the fact that you've learned all the colloquialisms, and to you, all of this is secondhand. Or not secondhand. All of this is second nature. There we go. All of this is second nature to you. Like, this is how you speak. And so for someone that's completely outside of the culture, you're going to sound like a crazy person. And it's going to confuse them a lot more than it's going to help them. So let's keep going.
I want my toes facing where I'm going, so forward. So I keep my elbows in tight, and my hands a little higher. There we go. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to go jab with our lead hand, and we're just going to go small step forward on this little line that you have. And I want to fully extend this jab.
So I do want to point out something here. The description that he gives here is an adequate description of the stance that you're in. However, it is not an accurate description. Because he says, I want my toes pointed at where I'm going, which his front toe is. His back toe is not. Nor should it be. If you have both of your feet facing forward, and this is something that we do in martial arts, though in martial arts, specifically in Taekwondo, the stance is significantly more exaggerated to where it's called an L stance because your back foot will actually be perpendicular to your front foot, where you have your front foot facing forward where you're going and your back foot will be completely perpendicular. And that's meant so that if you get force from the front, you can kind of stop the force here. And if you get force from the back, you can kind of stop the force there. So your front and back momentum is solid. And then by having your back foot sideways, it also gives you the ability to resist sideways force. So that's why we do the L stance. As you can see here, they don't do quite an L stance. And my assumption is probably because boxing is much more movement involved, that having a static stance like that would put you at a rather big disadvantage. Again, Taekwondo sparring is mostly linear. Boxing is very circular. So the reason I bring that up is when you are describing things, and here's another one of my rules, the why is more important than the what. Whenever you're training someone, you need to tell them why they are doing something when you are teaching them what they are doing. Because if you don't tell them why, they're going to come up with their own justification as why. Our brains are hardwired to come up with a why. If you don't tell them the why, they're going to come up with a why. And if they come up with the wrong why, they're going to adjust what they do based on the why in their head. And that can make them develop bad technique. Because if they think that the reason that you point your toes forward is because you always want to be moving forward and you never want to be moving side to side, then they are going to emphasize whenever they are boxing to always be pushing forward, which is not a good technique in boxing. So you always want to put the why, you always want to explain the why when you're giving them the what, and the why is more important than the what. Repeat after me, folks. The why is more important than the what. So when he's sitting here, he does give the why. I want my feet pointed in the direction that I'm going. But he doesn't go into a ton of description as to why that is. And then he also doesn't explain that, well, I only want my front foot actually pointing in the way I'm going. I want my back foot back here because of why. Because again, if Emiru followed his verbal instructions exactly the way that he said, she would have both of her legs forward, and she would be in Taekwondo. We actually have a stance called a walking stance, which is literally that. You have your legs about a little over like a shoulder and a half width apart laterally, and you have one in front of you, one behind you, and you put your arms down like this. And the only time we ever used that particular stance was when we were practicing a kick called a front rising kick, which is literally just your front leg going whoop, whoop. I've never seen that kick used in a single sparring match ever. It's not a useful kick. You hit with the top of your foot. So because you're moving up like this, you have to be aiming for a target that is parallel to the ground. So the only time I've ever seen that kick used is in breaking demonstrations, and even then it is extremely rare because it's really easy to damage the bones in your foot if you're hitting with the top of it in a bad way, and you're just not doing it very well that way. So she could have very easily slipped into, again, what we call a walking stance, instead of the good, solid boxing stance that he's showing her here. And it's good that he's actually physically showing her how to do it and not just explaining it, but that is an issue. And again, if he would start the training with, okay, this is what we're doing and this is why we're doing it, that's going to reinforce the thing. And then when you're critiquing their stance, you can always go back to, okay, why are you standing that way? What benefit does that give you? Oh, I'm standing this way because of this and this and this. Good. So, and when they're doing something wrong, you can go, how is that helping you do this? Or how is that helping you do this? Well, it's not. Why isn't it helping? Because I'm standing wrong? You're right. So how should you be standing? Like this. Perfect. Now we can move forward. So again, the why is more important than the what. And make sure that you are explaining everything. Because what he did right here is he didn't really explain why his other foot is not pointing straight forward. So let's keep going.
I want to with my step. My opposite hand, see, I want to keep this at my chin.
Okay.
Yeah, this always stays. So if I ever say opposite hand high, that means like whatever punch is being thrown, that hand stays up to my chin. If I throw my...
So again, 2 mistakes in one. One, don't use a translator. Again, we're teaching colloquialisms when we don't need to. We need her to focus on the technique right now. We can teach her the critique phrase later. And the second thing is there's no why. I have to keep my my offhand up by my cheek. Why? I have to do it. There's no why. So she's going to come up with her own. And actually what Emiru does here shows that she's actually a very good trainee.
All right, this one stays up.
Why does it stay up?
Because I don't want to get hit.
Oh.
So as you can see, that is an incredibly simple explanation and a very necessary, and it would take an additional couple seconds to just go, you have to keep your other hand up so you don't get hit. That, very, very simple, and they're going to latch onto that instantly because nobody wants to be hit. Well, some people want to be hit, but they have to pay for that. And you pay good money for that. No, you do have to focus on the why. And again, Emiru understood that because in her brain, she's going, well, it doesn't make sense for me to do that. There's a lot of other things that I can do. Or maybe she's seen other fighters that drop their hands for whatever reason. Or if you think in more martial arts, like if you look at a more traditional martial arts stance, like a traditional fighting stance is this, where you have one hand here and you have one hand in front that you guys can't see, but you have one hand in front and one hand here. And the reason why you did do this is, first of all, you're to the side. And second of all, you have a lot of different strikes that you can get in traditional or in martial arts that allow kicking and things like that. There's a lot of more ways that you can get hit. So you have to be able to defend a slightly wider area. Like martial arts, they can go for your legs. Boxing, you can't. And so one of the reasons you keep this hand down here is it protects your body, which is nice, but it also allows you to block low, which if both of your hands are way up here, you have to do this really large switch to block something low. So one of the reasons why technically when I fight or when I fought, I didn't use this a lot. I used, I guess, something that's more akin to a southpaw stance in boxing, where I would keep this hand low and this hand a little high because I blocked a lot with this. And by keeping it more down here instead of way up here, it allowed me to block high and block low while being very loose and fluid. And this I could chamber back here for punches. Because in general, the technique that I used for hand techniques was hands were mostly for blocking. So I can block with this hand, it blocks my body. This hand can block low blows to my legs. And then I can chamber this for a punch whenever I need it. And I liked keeping my hands open instead of tight because I used a lot of open hand techniques. So anyway, so again, we have, didn't explain why, and Emiru actually went and took the step of, okay, well, why? And it just shows you how much more confident she becomes once she understands the why. Oh, well then, yeah, I don't want to do this. I'm going to focus on this.
Like if I'm fighting and someone hits me, yeah, I'm gonna get knocked out.
That makes sense.
So small step. Yep, and then bring it back. Yep.
So this is the other problem I have with this training. And again, RJ has been doing this for a very long time. He has trained quite a few fighters. I'm not saying that he is a bad trader or that his training is somehow ineffective. What I'm saying is it's inefficient. Because, and we will see Emiru struggle with this throughout the entire video, depending on how much we actually watch of it. So much of boxing and so much of your strikes, as you'll see throughout this entire thing, relies on your footwork. If you do not have good footwork, your punches will not work. So what he's teaching here is he's basically linking your handwork with your footwork, which is essential for how boxing works. But she hasn't learned the footwork yet. And so right now, he is basically training her in two separate techniques simultaneously. Now, they are connected techniques. You cannot throw punches without the proper footwork. However, you can do the footwork without the punches. The footwork doesn't change massively when you take the punching out. So what would have been a significantly more effective method was start with the footwork. Have her leave her hands at her sides or whatever, and just have her walk around in her stance and get used to traveling in her stance and get used to being aware of her foot placement. That would mean there would be less things for her to confuse. And again, it would take a little bit longer for her to get to the punching. But by the time she would get to the punching, he wouldn't have to be critiquing her footwork anywhere near as much as he is. So this disobeys rule number 2. Remember to kiss. Keep it simple, stupid. I'm not telling RJ to kiss Emiru. I'm pretty sure that would be a bad idea. Don't go randomly kissing your trainees. That's bad. What I am saying, though, keep it simple, stupid. That last part, because I've had a conversation with a buddy of mine that uses the same phrase, the kiss phrase, but he takes off the last part because he feels that it's demeaning. It's intended to be. And the reason why, in a training position, it's very, very easy to get cocky because you're in the position of you have all the knowledge and your trainee has none of the knowledge. And you do need to remember that, first of all, you started the same place they did. So the only reason that you are not a trainee right now is you've taken the time and effort to learn this. And you need to keep your mindset in the idea that this is a person that doesn't know as much as I do. For lack of a better term, this is someone that is stupid in this particular thing. So the stupid is there to remind you, keep it stupid. Keep it simple, stupid. Keep it stupid. Make it so that the dumbest person in the world with no ability to comprehend really complex aspects of your particular training field can learn this. So the keep it simple, stupid is an essential part. You need to get into the mind of someone that has no knowledge. Is stupid the exact right word? No. Stupid is a derogatory term that has been used a lot of times against people with intellectual disabilities. So it's also very ableist. However, it fits the acronym and it fits it has the connotation that you kind of want in there. Remember, you can be just as stupid as your trainee if you're not taking the time to train them properly. So, this is a prime example of ignoring rule number 2. This is not keeping it simple. This is introducing multiple conflicting techniques at once. And you will notice that, especially in these early things, Emiru's technique is atrocious, which it should be. This is the first time that she's ever done any of this. But there's no power behind her punches. She's not rotating correctly. She's not using really any of her body in any of these attacks other than her arm. And again, I don't understand boxing. I do understand how to throw a punch. And one of the tips I used to give when I was teaching self-defense is the power for your punch comes from your hips. If all you're doing is punching with your arm, you are never going to get a solid punch. A good punch should involve rotating your torso so that your shoulder is fueling the punch just as much as your biceps and triceps and all the other muscles in here. You should also be rotating your entire torso, because that brings your shoulder in, which brings all these muscle groups. It brings your pecs into it. It brings your abdominal muscles and all your core muscles as you're rotating through, and then rotating your hips with that adds an additional kind of fulcrum or additional length to the lever that you're using. And so when you start rotating your hips, that brings your quadriceps in, that brings your calves, and you're actually pushing off to throw a good punch, you're actually pushing off the ball of your foot to get all the rotation. That's how you get your entire body mass into a punch. What was I trying to say here? So yeah, you'll notice that her technique is really, really bad here, because he's not really focusing on technique. What it looks like to me, and again, I'm not a mind reader, I'm just inferring based on my understanding of training. It looks like he's trying to get her to focus on her footwork, and because footwork is tied so incredibly strongly to your punches in that he's just decided to tie them now so he doesn't have to tie them together later. Which again, there might be a benefit to that. Again, I am not a boxer, so it's possible that learning the footwork separately from the handwork can cause issues. From a training perspective, I would say footwork first, handwork after, and take it step by step. So that's probably my biggest critique of what he does is he tends to overly complicate things and introduce too many things at once. And again, part of that may be the fact that this is a 20-minute training session. Again, when I trained Taekwondo, we did 2 hours. 20 minutes is nowhere, and they do have cuts and stuff in here, so I would say it's probably closer to maybe half an hour, maybe 45 minutes, but that's still an exceptionally short training session. Especially for like a first timer. And he goes through a lot more stuff than I think really is necessary in your first training session. Again, Taekwondo, we don't learn a single kick or punch in our first class. The only thing you learn is you learn stances, you do endurance training, and they may teach you blocking on your first day. Though a lot of classes won't, because again, just learning your stances is hard enough, and learning how to move and stuff in your stance takes a while to learn and even more to train, because learning it and training it are two very different things. So that's my little critique here. I have no idea how much of the video we're going to get through here. We've been doing this for an hour and we are 3 minutes into her video. So I will probably start skipping around a little bit more in a little bit, but let's keep going for a little.
Small step. Yep, with the front foot. So the whole time I should be going down the line like this. This is without the front foot, like this. Yeah.
Like that?
So as you can see here, he did the footwork without punching, or at least I couldn't see him punching. It looked like his arms were still. So it's obvious that he was focusing on the footwork, but he decided to add the handwork in there at the same time. And I think that's a bad idea. And you can see it in her form, just how poor it is.
Yep, but what I want you to do is I'm going to throw it once, small step, then I'm going to just stop. Then I'm going to do it again. Pop. Yep. Remember 50-50 weight, so drop my level a little bit, bend my legs a little bit, elbows in. There we go. Now go. There we go, yes.
I feel like no strength in my arms, so I'm like,
We're gonna build. We'll build to it.
Yeah.
So again, and go. Then lower your face a little bit. Bend in my legs. There we go. Yes, good. Want that right elbow tucked in a little bit more to your rib cage. There we go. Yes. Boom. Boom. And then stop. And then go again. Pop. Yes. So I want you thinking about this though. When I throw this, I want to turn all the way like that.
So here again, really, really bad technique from Emiru because he didn't teach her how to punch. He just has her doing the motions. And because of that, she has spent this entire time training throwing jabs wrong. And he doesn't explain here the why. He just explains the what.
And I want a good fist. Yep.
So he just taught her how to throw a proper jab, which is important. Did not explain the why. He didn't explain why you want to rotate when you do a jab. There has to be a rotation. He explains it later. The reason why is if you punch like this, there's a chance that you're going to punch with the front of your fist and you're going to hit your knuckles and things like that, and that will cause them to compress. You can break your hand doing that. When you punch, you want to be hitting with these knuckles here because these bones are straight. They don't bend. And your, what are these? These are the carpals. Yeah. The carpals here are a bunch of these little small bones with a bunch of cartilage in them. And so when you hit, this is going to compress here and it'll compress these, but they're designed to compress. And then you have this big old long pair of bones here, the radius and ulna, that don't bend. And when you have it fully extended, you also have the humerus here that doesn't bend. So you have this very long lever of force that is basically taking all the force from your shoulder, thrusting everything forward into the jab. Now, jab in and of itself is not a power punch. It's meant to be very fast. But you still want to have the proper technique. And so he explains it later, but again, he misses the why. The why is more important than the what. So let's watch it again. As you can see,
Yes, good.
much better technique.
Boom. Yes. Good. Small step though, remember? Not a big step. Yes. And then 50-50 weight. Remember, I want this. I want to be able to go back. I want to be able to go forward.
So again, now he's explaining why all these things. The why is more important than the what. He didn't explain that before, so now that she's doing it wrong, he has to go back and explain the why. If he had explained the why before, we wouldn't have to. We wouldn't have as big an issue of her not getting this. Now, again, one of the reasons he probably avoided explaining the why is because he's introducing so much stuff. The more things you introduce, the less they will retain. So it's possible he was trying to kind of speed run this, where he's just going, all right, I'm going to get her to do this and this and this, and I can tell her the why later. But right now, I just want to get her doing something. And as you can see, that creates really bad technique. As you can see, her elbow will drift fairly regularly, where he has to keep reminding her to do that, which that's really common. You will watch her hand slowly drift down. You'll see that this hand is nowhere near her chin, which is where he told her to be. You'll watch it just drift further and further away, and that elbow will drift further and further out. All of these things could be fixed by explaining the why and focusing on mastery before introducing a new technique.
So again, now we'll turn and go that way. Same thing. Top. Yep. Fully extend it. It should turn like this. My knuckles should turn like that. Yeah, there we go. Boom.
So again, he still hasn't explained why she turns her fist. He's just telling her that's what she needs to do.
Yes, good. Beautiful. Good. Yep. Good. And think about, I want to really extend this up. That one. Just the jab hands and turn. There we go. Yes. Looks better. Yep. Fully extended. But see, remember, rotate this as well. Like I don't want to just throw it straight down like this.
Yeah.
I want this to rotate as it comes out. See, so it turns out like this.
So again, still hasn't explained why. He's just explaining the what.
Good. Again. Yep. See, and I want your knuckles to face like this. I don't want it to just be here. I want it to fully rotate. See how? Because I don't want to break my hand if I go like this.
See, and there's the why. He doesn't explain anything behind, like, how could you break your hand? It doesn't feel... How does turning your hand make it so that you're going to break it or not break it? He never explains that part of the why. He just says, well, we don't want to break your hand. So even when he does explain the why, he's not explaining the full why. Again, the why is more important than the what. When you explain to her that I want you to keep your other fist high so that you don't get hit, her fist has not really left this general area. It'll drop a little bit, but she's keeping it here because she understands the why. But she keeps missing this part because he didn't explain why. Now that she knows she could break her hand if she does it wrong, she's going to get it better more often because she understands some of the why. She still doesn't understand how you break your hand by this because he doesn't explain it, but that little bit of why improves their technique.
Turn again.
So like for getting stronger punches, I would just have to weight train, right? For the most part.
Yeah, it comes through time to technique as well. You can throw a good punch even if you're not super muscly.
Okay.
Again, boom. Fully extended though. I want it like right here. Look, when I throw this, it should be like that.
Oh.
See that? Yeah. There we go, yes.
So this is where I talk about the idea of perfect practice makes perfect. She has done this punch without fully extending so many times that that is what her muscle memory knows. It is only now, and again, this is edited, so this is probably like 5, maybe 10 minutes. I would doubt it's that long, but probably about 5 minutes of training this. And she spent the majority of the time doing it wrong. So her muscle memory already is telling her to do it wrong. You need, from the very first time, you need to make sure that you are teaching the exact right way to do it every single time, because perfect practice makes perfect. Bad practice makes bad technique. So again, I'm not saying that he's a bad trainer. He's just being inefficient in this particular training session.
Small steps. There we go, yep. Elbow, right elbow in. Yep, there we go. Boom, turn. Again. There we go. Better. Better. Small steps up. Whoop. There, better. Yes, good. Small step.
So this, what he's doing right here is really good. He is ensuring that when she does the right thing, he praises her and makes her aware of that. That is, I don't have a rule for that one now. I will come up with a rule because it's insanely important. But when they do something right, you need to highlight it. Because again, right now, they think everything that they're doing is right because they don't understand. Or they think everything that they're doing is wrong. But they're not going to be able to tell which one is right is which one is wrong because they don't have that experience. They don't have that training. That's what you're there for. And so you need to ensure that when they do the right thing, you go, okay, that was right. I want you to focus on that and do that exact thing again. Because again, perfect practice makes perfect. And you have to tell them when they're doing it right.
Now big step. There we go. Small step. There we go. Yes. Good. 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 Yes. Turn. Now we're going to do our right hand. So now
So we're turning a punch
we're going to stay in
or
our
a cross.
stance. We're going to throw our right hand from in our stance. I want my right elbow to stay tucked. This needs to stay high to my chin. So when I throw my 2, I want to do what's called...
So again, using a translator, and just forgot the translation. I'm going to throw my 2. Your 2? Your number 2? You're gonna take a dookie here? 2 means nothing. What he's referring to here is a 1-2 combo. Jab, punch. And he will use that term later on, but he never explains that I'm going to throw my 2 doesn't mean anything. Again, don't use a translator. If you want them to use a certain terminology, start by introducing the terminology. Teach them the language. Don't use a translator. So start in the beginning. Okay, now we're going to teach you how to throw a cross. A cross is a punch from your backhand. It goes across the body, and that's why we call it a cross. It's also referred to as a 2 because of what's called a 1-2 combo. We'll deal with that later. But if he wants to introduce the idea of a 2 here, he needs to start off by going, I may call it a 2. That's because it's part of what's called a 1-2 combo. We'll deal with that in a second. What the best thing he can do here is don't call it a 2 until he's ready to introduce the 1-2 combo. Here, and this is, again, it's something that separates decent trainers from really good trainers, is learning how to adjust the language that you use based on the relative experience of the person that you're training. You know, if I'm teaching someone a new acting technique, let's say, if they have never acted before, I am going to speak very simply and talk kind of in the language of emotions. What are you feeling right now? If I'm like training my buddy DK, who has a degree in acting, I'm gonna go. Oh, okay. Let's try some Adler technique right now. Where do you see yourself? Or you know what? Let's do some Meisner technique training. It doesn't seem like you're really in this particular. I can just say that he'll know exactly what I'm talking about, and he can just start doing it because he has the experience and the knowledge. Really, really good trainers will adjust their language. Novice trainers or trainers that are just really never learned how to train will use the language that they're most comfortable with, which will confuse your trainees.
Squashing the bug. A lot of people, when they throw this, they'll kind of put their toes up like this, and they'll kind of drag their foot, which is not a good habit. When I throw my cross, I want to step on this bug, so I should go here. See how my foot is?
So this is both good and bad. This is a good example of teaching the language versus using a translator. He's going, I want you to squash that bug. What does that mean? Well, it's where you're positioned like this. However, he's not explaining why squashing the bug is useful at all. The reason that you're doing this, you want to have a really solid connection to the ground. Again, the power for a punch comes from your hips. You want to push off the ball of your foot so that it can lead your hip forward, which also leads your shoulder forward, which drives into the punch itself. When you push off the ball, you are using the calf muscles here, the quadriceps, the glutes. You are using the latissimus dorsi, I think is the muscle group here. You're using your core muscles here. You're using your deltoids. You're using one of the bicep or tricep. I can't remember which one it actually uses for that. But you're using all of these muscles in the punch, which is what you want to. That's where you get power. It also means it's a little bit slower, which is why you have the jab that doesn't use anywhere near as many muscles, but still should use some of them. So yeah, again, he does a little bit of teaching the language instead of using a translator, which is nice, but he doesn't explain the why. He explains the what, I want you to squash the bug, and he teaches what squash the bug means. He doesn't tell you the why. And again, when you explain the why, they're going to be able to understand and visualize it significantly better. And you will notice that Emiru here is going to struggle with throwing her punch for a little while here because she's focusing on making sure that her foot looks like this, not focusing on the fact that the reason her foot needs to look like this is because it engages all of these muscles. So all she's focusing on is, let's make sure my foot looks like that while my hand looks like this, and forget everything outside. And that's not what you want to do.
My cigarette, my ghost.
Oh, okay.
So when I throw my cross, I'm here. See how my opposite hand doesn't fall down though? Yeah, it stays right here. Same thing with this. This rotates from my rib cage. I'm here. Boom. Do it again. From your stance. Ooh. And make sure this comes to a stance right here. I want it to come out like this. Yup, like that.
So
right
this,
there, yeah.
What he did right there is really, really good. If you're doing something physical, one thing I tend to recommend to all trainers, before you touch a trainee, always, and I realize this may sound like woke nonsense or something, it's not. As an assault survivor, if somebody touches me and I'm not expecting it, I can have a flashback. You have no idea what your trainee has gone through in their life, nor should you. So it's always a good idea. And it also helps them to understand the reason why you're touching them, because Emiru could, I don't know why I have such a hard time pronouncing her name correctly. Emiru could misinterpret this touch as a kind of flirting, because that is a way that girls will flirt with men, is they will find reasons to make physical contact. So Emiru could misinterpret that touch as him finding a way to make physical contact as a sign of flirting. From everything I can see here, it's not. He's doing a very essential thing in a physical training aspect, which is letting her feel exactly what it's supposed to feel like by actually physically directing. But the absolute best thing you can do in that situation to go up and go, hey, do you mind if I touch you, or do you mind if I put my hands on you for a second, so that I can show you the proper way to do this? Because again, first of all, that gets rid of all preconceptions. It also allows the person to kind of prepare themselves for contact, which again, some people it's no problem with. Doesn't look like it was a problem here with Emiru. However, it can be a very, very big problem, and it can absolutely derail your training session. So simply a quick question: hey, do you mind if I touch you or if I put my hands on you? And then you need to tell them why. So you just come up and go, hey, can I touch you? That's a really good way to get slapped. But if you come up and go, hey, do you mind if I touch you to show you the proper way to do this particular punch? That gets all pretense out. It prepares them for what's going to happen, and it will force them to focus on what you're trying to do. It's just as possible that Emiru could be focusing on the physical touch itself, as opposed to that. She could be focusing on RJ himself, because not only is he a very imposing figure, but from my understanding of male beauty standards, he's not a bad-looking guy. So there's a billion different things that Emiru could be focusing on. And when you direct their focus to something and go, hey, can I touch you in order to show you this particular thing? And then focus on them. Do you feel this muscle stretching? Do you feel this thing happening? That's what I want you to focus on. Anytime you can link visual information to other kind of sensory information, it's going to help them retain it better. So let's keep going.
Good. So I want you to throw it and then small step forward. Yep, now throw. Yes, good. And then think about squashing that bug hard on that right foot. That cigarette motion that I was talking about.
So again, this is technically a good use of colloquialisms because again, he taught the language first. He's not using a translator. Now, he taught her a couple different phrases that technically mean the same thing. That's generally not a good idea because now you're going to confuse them. In the same way with tabletop RPGs, if you want someone to do the same thing, don't use different language to express the exact same outcome. Because anytime in a tabletop RPG, if you use different language, people are going to assume the reason you're not using the language you already used is because this is different than that. Same thing is true in training. If you want them to do the same thing, don't give it multiple names. Give it one name and stick to that name. Again, teaching the language, very good. He's not using a translator here, but he taught her two different words for the exact same moment and keeps using them interchangeably. Now, the reason he does that is because different people will have different reactions. A lot of people don't step on bugs like that. There's a lot of people that just don't step on bugs. People are a little bit more familiar with putting out a cigarette because that used to be a big thing that happened in movies and that even if you don't smoke. So again, there are two different phrases that give you the exact same, that have the exact same outcome. Choose one or the other and stick with it.
There you go. Boom. Yes. And then don't get too tall. Remember, 50-50 with my...
So now we have a using a translator again. Now he's just saying, don't get too tall. Don't get too tall. I'm growing now. No, what he's referring to is you need to keep your stance low. You need to keep your knees bent. But that's a colloquial term that's used in boxing. Don't get too tall. And so now again, he's using a translator. Don't get too tall, using a translator.
Yeah, it's a lot to think about, huh?
And there he even admits it. Hey, I've given you a lot of information. And that can be a very effective thing going, hey, because what's happening now is Emiru's getting confused, which she should be. There's a lot of information going on. This is a prime example to give to anyone to explain why boxing is not simple. It's a very complex sport. And this just goes to show you just how much thought has to go into throwing a punch. So this is a good technique. He's using some laughter to kind of get her focused again. And he's also reassuring her, hey, this is a lot to go for. Don't worry, that's normal. He's laughing. He's making it calm. So that's a good thing.
It's like
There we
so
go.
many small things. Okay.
Boom. Fully rotated. Yes. Yes. Good. Good. Then, boom. And don't lean too much forward with it. I should be able to throw it right here and snap it.
So what he's explaining here makes perfect sense to me. However, because Emiru seems to not be grasping it completely, I think he could have explained that a little bit better. Like everything he says there makes perfect sense. Don't lean too far forward. I should be able to. And as soon as he goes, I should be able to, he kind of goes not really into colloquialisms, but he doesn't really explain everything. So this is an area where it would be better for Emiru for him to go into a little bit more explanation, whether that's talking about different muscle groups, whether it's just talking about, okay, I'm going to bring my arm all the way and actually walking through the entire process. Again, this is so second nature to him. He never thinks about any of this stuff because he's been doing this for 15 years. And that is the hardest thing to learn as a trainer, is how to get yourself into the mindset of a brand new student when you've been doing it for over a decade. So I think we're going to skip forward a little bit here because this just kind of repeats the same stuff.
Better. Yep. Again. Whoop. Don't get tall.
So he uses that constantly.
There we go. Yes, better.
Never has someone told me don't get told.
That is my favorite thing about this video is Emiru. Emiru is not tall. She's tiny. She's amazing. That is one of my favorite statements here. It does show that Emiru is a good trainee in the idea that she is trying to kind of keep herself calm by making her own comedy. She's also an entertainer, and she realizes that she's making this content, so she wants to be entertaining as well. But that is a technique that a lot of really good trainees will do, is they will find ways to get their own enjoyment out of the training. Especially when the trainer in this case is not really focusing on that aspect of training, is that it's not fun. And so she's finding a way to make it fun. So I think I'm going to skip ahead a little bit here. Get to the point. Because most of the stuff I'm going to say is going to be the same stuff over and over again. And I want to talk about the next part where she actually starts hitting targets. Okay, so now he's going to put some gloves on her. And this is where the training is going to change a little bit. This is another thing where I think, again, begin at the beginning and keep it simple, stupid. Those two rules rely on the idea that you don't move on to step 2 until you've finished and mastered step 1. And by master, again, I don't mean that your technique is perfect. I mean that you understand and have shown that you can do the technique correctly. Not that you have no room for improvement, but that you understand how to do it correctly and can do it correctly repeatedly. That's what I mean by mastery. She has not mastered what she's doing so far, and now he's going to teach her a completely different aspect, which is aiming her punches effectively. If you were watching before, you would watch as a lot of her punches just go in kind of weird places. It's because she wasn't trying to aim them. She wasn't focusing on aiming them. She was focusing on the 20 billion other things that have all been taught to her really, really fast. And again, this is a very, very short lesson. I don't know how much of this lesson is edited out. But if we say that they edited out half of the repetitions, so this is actually a 40-minute lesson instead of a 20-minute lesson, that is still a very, very short lesson. So I can understand him moving quickly, especially since it's being filmed and he wants to give, just as much as this probably is not meant to be advertising for his gym, it is advertising for his gym. Whether he wants it to be or not, this is advertising for his gym and for him as a trainer. So I think he's trying to get her to a point of doing things that look more common when you think about boxing training, which is like using a bag or hitting targets and stuff like that. They could have spent an entire 2 hours just on footwork and then matching footwork to punches. And that would have been an extremely effective training session. They didn't. So this is me breaking rule number 1, begin at the beginning. And rule number 2, keep it simple, stupid. They've moved on before she's mastered the techniques. And if she trains these at home, she's going to train them wrong. And you're going to have to untrain her when she comes back.
Put your gloves on and we'll do some pad work.
Oh god, okay. Oh, I am sweating.
Are you?
Yes.
Don't think about throwing hard, fast. All we're working, like for a while, it's just going to be all about technique. So like I told you, it's pretty boring.
Yeah, no strength.
Yep. So okay, I want you thinking we're just going to work on your jab. So every time I say jab, I want you to keep your hands high. Yep. Make sure this never drops as you throw your jab. And you're always going to throw a small step unless I'm like far away. You have to cover distance, so then I would take a bigger step. But right here, we're just going to go.
So here's another thing that is extremely common. Again, I don't have a name for the rule other than it falls under keep it simple, stupid. He's introduced an exception to a rule that he just introduced. There are exceptions to every single rule. Do not talk about the exception until they've learned the rule. when he's sitting here, he says, I want you to take a small step forward. The reason he's focusing on that small step is that is good boxing technique. Anytime you lunge too far, you become unbalanced, which might mean your hands will drop. It will open you up various positions for body shots. Like, there's a lot of problems with having your stance too wide. It also makes it more difficult for you to stay upright, and like there's just tons of problems with that. So he's trying to teach her how to keep her stance tight so that she can be a good boxer. But there are situations where you want to move faster, you want to move forward, so you will take larger steps. That is an exception to the rule. You don't need to introduce the exception until after they have mastered the rule. And in this particular instance, because he can control where he is, there's no reason to introduce that exception, because all he has to do is make sure that he's never far enough away that she has to move that far. And that, again, is part of the role of being a trainer, is when you are teaching them something, don't put them into a situation where what you're teaching them is going to become ineffective immediately. Put them in a situation where they can learn the rule correctly and then go, okay, you've learned that, you're confident in that, you've mastered it. What happens if I'm here? I take 2 steps? No, you can just take a bigger step. You only do that when here because, again, the why is more important than what. He still hasn't explained why taking small steps is important. So he's missing out on that. Let's keep going here.
So small step with your jab. Go. Hey, yep. And then follow. Like if I move around, you just think small steps to, yes, there we go, yep. Jab. Oh. Fully extend it, go. There we go, but don't let this fall. Again. Hey, yeah, good. That was actually really good. And again. Hey, yeah, small step though.
So if you watch, like I watched a video of him training someone else, he is very, very used. Like this is apparently a very, very common training technique where you literally just follow him around, and it's meant to kind of focus on your footwork and kind of movement work. And then every so often he'll put a glove up and you have to hit. And it's meant to train a lot of different things at once. It's an extremely effective training thing. But he's so used to working with people that knows what they're doing that you watch him do stuff and go, oh shoot, she doesn't know what I'm supposed to do. Okay, jab. So this is a training problem. And this is entirely on the trainer. And again, it's that idea of keep it simple, stupid. You have to put yourself in the mindset of someone stupid in this particular realm, someone that doesn't understand what's going on. And he hasn't done that here because, again, he trains a lot of people. He's very used to this. He's very used to this particular training method because it's a very effective training method for someone that understands what it's used for. He hasn't explained any of the why. He hasn't explained any of that. He's just doing this. And so it's hurting Emiru because now she's getting very confused about what she's supposed to be doing and not. She's dropping her hand. She wasn't really dropping her hand a whole lot when we were watching her moving around. And especially when he told her, hey, keep your hand up because you don't want to get hit in the face. She had that thing up here ready and prepared. Now that he's confused her, the technique that she just learned is starting to drop. And again, remember, they were working on extension before, and now that's going away because he's introduced something new and she didn't master the technique before. She'd just gotten proficient.
Think about not jumping and just stepping.
Yeah, I know, I'm like jumping.
And go. There, see, jump again. Think step.
So this is another one where he's kind of using translation or using a translator where he's saying, try not jumping. I mean, technically, yes, she 100% is jumping, but he's not really explaining why jumping is bad or even what he specifically defines as jumping. Because what I would consider jumping is very different from what's happening here. Again, my martial arts background, in Taekwondo, we would have multiple kind of varieties of kick. You had standing kicks, and then you had what were called hop kicks. One of my favorite kicks that I can't really do anymore because my hip has degenerated to the point that I can't get my leg high enough. But one of my bread and butter kicks was called a hopping side kick. And all it was is side kick is you kick with your foot. It's a piston kick. So you channel the leg up and then it goes out like that. And you actually hit with the side of your foot. And it's a really, really effective kick. And there's multiple variations on it. And one of them is what's called a hopping side kick. And so what it is the kind of earlier version that you learned is what's called a step behind side kick, where you take your back foot and you place it right behind your front foot so that you're stepping forward. Basically, if your stance is like this, you take this foot and you put it here, and then you move forward and kick. And so it gives you distance, and allows you to close distance, and that additional forward momentum all goes into your kick. Hopping side kick, you don't step, you just jump forward, and your back foot goes immediately where your front foot was, and your front foot goes through your opponent. So it's one of my favorite techniques in the world, but that was a hop. There is also a jumping side kick, and that literally requires you jumping into the air and then throwing the technique. So you actually have to gain thing. There's also a hopping front snap kick, and then a jumping front snap kick, and then there was a flying front snap kick. So all hop, jump, fly were 3 different versions of kicks that all used very different techniques. And so by not explaining, hey, don't jump, to me, she's not jumping, she's hopping. And that is a perfectly fine thing to do in Taekwondo. And it's not here because it's not what he's training her to do. So again, don't use a translator, teach the language. Even if it is a word that you understand and the other person understands roughly what it is, you need to teach the language. Don't use a translator.
Step. There we go. That was a big step. Small step. There we go. And remember, snap it to where it's like this.
So, and this is where the problem with combining so many things before she has mastered any of them comes in. Because he did, there we go, because she had a really good jab, but she took a big step. So now he has to go, you did good, but you did bad. And so now you're giving your trainee mixed messages by going, you did good, but you did bad at the same time. And they have to somehow figure out which of those things are good and which of those things are bad, because from their perspective, it was all one fluid motion. And he's focusing on 3 different things, which is what he's supposed to be doing. But again, he's moved her so quickly that she didn't master these things before. And now putting these moves together that she hasn't mastered has caused her to lose her technique. Which again, really, really common problem in training. When you move them too quickly, you will watch the things that you already trained them, they just forget them. So let's go a little bit more with
So I
this.
don't hurt my hand. I don't want you jamming your hand. Yeah, fully rotate. Good. Go. Hey, elbow in though. Go. Jab. There we go. Yes. Jab. Good. Don't jump. Yeah. And again, jab. Hey, good.
This is another really, really good training technique that I'm not sure if he's doing this consciously or not, or if this is just inborn talent from him doing this for so long. But we had something happen that was funny, that got her kind of out of the mindset. And instead of chastising her, going, hey, get back to work, he acknowledged it was funny, and immediately redirected her back to, hey, let's do this again. Really, really effective training technique. You are always going to have distractions. You cannot stop distractions. There's nothing you can do to stop it. So what you need to do, acknowledge the distraction happened, ensure them that, hey, distraction happened. It's okay for distractions to happen. You're not a bad person. I'm not going to yell at you because of a distraction that happened, but we need to focus on this. So acknowledge it, laugh a little bit about it, immediately refocus. That is a fantastic thing to do.
Jab. Beautiful. So land it sternum. Go. Hey, don't jump. Go. Hey, there we go. Better. Follow wherever I'm going. Make sure your feet don't cross. There we go.
So again, he's talking about all these things that we haven't seen him explain. Now, there was a cut in there. It's possible that he talked about not letting her feet cross somewhere else. I haven't heard him say that. So again, she hasn't mastered movement, and now he's trying to get her to not only master movement, but also master watching her opponent effectively. And there's just so much going on that she's losing her technique. I don't think I'm going to harp on this too much more because it just keeps going. And again, I don't want this to be a replacement for the video. I'm going to link the video in the description down below. Please go watch it because Emiru does such a great job here learning a very, very difficult thing from a very talented and skilled trainer that's just making some mistakes. And despite the mistakes, she still does very, very well due to doing this. So I really would like you guys to go watch this. And I don't think, I think I've said everything I need to about this in particular. So, yeah, I mean, this is what I do. Is I used to train trainers. I actually at one point, without getting into too many details, I got offered a six-figure salary at one point to become the head of training for a charity that unfortunately never got going because of politics, to be perfectly honest. Not politics within the charity, it was literally the city that we were trying to get land in. The city planner was a dipshit and wouldn't let us spend the money that we had raised. We raised something like $350 or $60 million for this charity, and he just wouldn't let us use it. And it was all politics and nonsense. But yeah, like this is what I used to do, and if I can ever get my various disabilities under control, this is what I would like to do in the future. Training is what I do. And so having such a great example of an extremely skilled master of this particular art, training someone, I thought was just a really good example to show that even really good skilled masters of an art and in training, because I mentioned before, he does a lot of things really well there. He just makes a few mistakes that are really common with masters that become trainers without learning how to train. So I hope you guys found this is interesting, because again, this is the most fascinating thing I can do. RJ or Emiru, if either of you guys see this video, first of all, make better choices. There are much better ways you can waste your time than watching my videos. But if either of you are watching this, thank you. I sincerely appreciate it. What I would love to sit down with RJ, I'd love to sit down with Emiru and talk about trading techniques and stuff like that, because it's all really useful stuff that people don't talk about. We have kind of thrown the idea of training away, especially once we started doing things like computer training and online courses and this is stuff like that, and YouTube videos. We've really moved away from the idea of learning how to properly train, and now we just focus on, we'll give them all the information and make them train themselves. And that's not an efficient way to train people, and it does create a lot of people that think that they're doing things correctly and they're not. So overall, the skill floor and skill ceiling in a lot of fields is dropping because we're not allowing people to be trained adequately. And I saw it in retail constantly. And as soon as I was allowed to stop my trainees from focusing so much on like computer training courses and that, and started being able to do individual and group trainings for my employees, they saw the business just do extremely well. Turnover would get lower. Profits would soar, job satisfaction would get a lot better. Like there are so many benefits to adequate to training, and corporate America just doesn't care about it because it's significantly harder to quantify, and it requires, like, you have to know how to train people. Whereas if you give them a computer program to watch, they've done tons of psychological studies and all these things to find out the most effective way to get people to retain knowledge. And that's what goes into all these different training programs, and they're just not effective. And they haven't been since their inception, but they spent hundreds of millions of dollars on them, so they're going to use them. Anyway, I hope you guys found this interesting. I love this stuff. I could sit here and watch this entire 20-minute video 4 times and do a different critique every single time, because that's what I do. But anyway, that's going to be all for me today. I will see you guys tomorrow. All right? Bye-bye.